who knows the answer to how many branches of government we have, in our national government? Just shout it out. 3. What are they? Okay. How many branches of government do we have in our municipal government here in North Andover? 1, 2. What are they? What are they? What are the branches of government we have in North Andover? It's 2 of the 3 of our national branches of government. Who wants to take a guess? Come on.
You said legislative over here.
Legislative, correct, and no. That only leaves executive, right? So we have a legislative branch of government in our community and an executive branch of government, and the people represented here on this panel right now represent, represent both of those branches of government. I lead as moderator the legislative form of government. We have a form of government called open town meeting. Anybody have any idea when open town meeting was formed? 30 years ago? 50 years ago? Shout it out.
Pilgrimage time.
Pilgrimage time, okay, pilgrim time. Almost correct, 1646 is when our town was formed. And we had a form of government formed at that time known as open town meeting. An open town meeting, you needed to be a white, landowning male of a certain religion in order to come to town meeting. Today, everybody can come to town meeting. You can come to town meeting. However, you need to be a citizen who's registered to vote in North Andover in order to vote at town meeting. And in town meeting, you are our Congress, our House of Representatives, and I act as sort of the Speaker of the House. And in town meeting, we establish all of the policy and laws for our town government. And the biggest one that we do is called the town budget. Anybody have an idea how large our town budget is? Guesses?
$5 million.
$5 million.
Bigger than Andover's.
Bigger than Andover's. That's not accurate, actually. We wish it were, but it is not. And it's more than $5 million. Any other guesses? Dark side of the room over here? Is it $10 million? 30 million? Come on.
I see a guess for
Shout
70.
it out. How much?
He's saying 70?
70? Are they getting close?
Close.
Keep going.
Okay.
170.
Go ahead. Almost exactly correct. $100 million. And the people up here spend and or create that $100 million. And yes, exactly. And we'd like to create more if we possibly could, because we'd like to spend more. And we're going to talk about what those things are. So right now, the first person to speak is going to be our superintendent of schools, Dr. Price. And Dr. Price is the chief executive officer of the school department. She represents half of the municipal form of government and acts as that chief executive. Jennifer.
Good morning. So that means that I oversee a budget of approximately $50 million each year that we spend on educating all of you. If you think about that, actually, it's about $12,000 a year every student in the North Andover Public Schools. So all of you, the town of North Andover, is spending $12,000 on educating you each year. The vast majority of that money actually goes to hire the amazing faculty and staff that work with you every day. About 85% of our budget goes to supporting our faculty and staff and hiring those. I will tell you, we work really hard to put as much money as we can into faculty and staff because those are the people who actually make a difference in your education each and every day. So I'm going to just explain a little bit about what we do, and I'm going to give you a very concrete example that's really kind of relevant. So I entered here 3 years ago, and we looked at class sizes, and we said, wow, the class sizes in North Andover are really big. They're much bigger than the state average. They're bigger than we want. And we said, so how can we, and we meaning myself and the school committee actually are the folks I work for. They hire me, they supervise me, they evaluate me, I work for them. And we said, okay, so how are we going to tackle issues of class size? We would like to tackle issues of class size at all levels. Where can we start? And we made the decision to start at the elementary level. Good or bad, that's where we made the decision. We felt if we could really reduce class size at the elementary level, it would be really helpful for kids who are learning to read, et cetera, et cetera. So we looked at our elementary schools and we said, okay, let's reduce class size. Oh, we can't hire any more teachers. There's no more rooms to put these teachers in. So if you think back to your elementary schools, there weren't like extra rooms in your elementary schools. Every room was being used. So we said, okay, how are we going to reduce class size if we don't have any more classrooms? So we started to think about what we could do. And the town manager and myself, working together with the school committee and the board of selectmen, made the decision that the best option to do that was actually to build the Ann Bradstreet Early Childhood Center, which was to create 16 kindergarten classrooms and attach those to the ECC and to the preschool. And so by doing that, we actually freed up classrooms in all 5 of the elementary schools so that we could eventually, over time, we've already done some of that, hire teachers to reduce class sizes at the elementary level. So as you will see, 2 years ago, the town of North Andover said, yes, let's spend $6 million building the new Early Childhood Center up the hill from you. We've been working on that. As you know, it's happening. You walk by it, you see it. Your buses have had to go out a different way. The modulars are actually being delivered in 3 weeks. And starting in September, we are going to have a new pre-KK space up there that frees up space and helps reduce elementary classroom sizes. Before I came, about 50% of the elementary classrooms were above what the school committee wanted, which was 18 to 22 for second grade and lower, and up to 25 through 3 through 5th. 50% of our classrooms were above that average. Next year, we're only anticipating that 17% of our classes will be above that. We have made a significant change, and we are only about 6 or 7 teachers away from getting to 0%. We saw a problem, we worked together, we've addressed that issue. So as superintendent, that's what I do. What are our biggest needs? How do we address them? I know you think I do things like just call snow days, but also I get to have some fun thinking strategically about how to support you and make sure that all the kids in North Andover get the best possible education.
So the next person that we're going to hear from is the Chief Executive Officer of our municipal side of government, and his name is Andrew Mailer. Mr. Manager. Excuse me.
Take any rank you can give me, it'd be great. So I'm Andrew Mailer, I'm the town manager. I'm the Chief Executive Officer on the municipal side of government. I work for a 5-member board of selectmen who are elected by your parents to serve in that particular policy-making role. My job is to manage the municipal side and work with Dr. Price and the school committee and the selectmen to deliver on a number of joint projects. On the municipal side, we have police and fire and public works, plowing the roadways, making sure we have a youth center. We have a fantastic youth center. The youth center falls under my sort of management, as does the senior center, council on aging, and those various items. We're also responsible for maintaining and plowing the parking lots around the schools and the sidewalks so that you can walk the schools, and I think we do a pretty reasonable job of that most of the times. The most exciting part of what I do is developing a budget with Dr. Price so that we go into town meeting for I think the last 6 or 7 years in a row. That budget has been approved unanimously by town meeting without any amendment, which is great. The most absolutely top-notch item of that from a accomplishment perspective has been our facility master plan. In the last 7 years, we've built a new fire station, renovated town hall. We'll build a new senior center, building a new facility to reduce classroom size. Have also renovated our public works facility, and on, all done with the help of town meeting members and without having to affect taxes in a way that would make it less likely to support. The most significant project of this town meeting, in addition to the senior center, is that we're renovating the ball fields behind here, in between the new ECC facility and the middle school, spending nearly $9 million to completely renovate those spaces, adding balls fields, walking paths, an amphitheater. We're going to keep fireworks in that space moving forward as well, which is important. Those are the exciting and fun things that we do. Ultimately, the great part about North Andover is that we work collaboratively, school committee and board of selectmen, superintendent and I, and the moderator on a regular basis. We've had remarkable success because we've figured out a way to find a way to yes on most decisions, and that is quite frankly different than a lot of places. So we spend less time fighting and more time trying to find solutions to problems that we have to face each and every day.
So you've heard from the manager that he works for a group of elected officials called the Board of Selectmen. Dr. Price works for a group of people who are elected who are called the school committee. And we have the chair of the school committee, Amy Magley, and two of her colleagues today. And Amy, I'll leave it to you.
Great, thank you. So, as was mentioned, there are 5 school committee members who are elected as well. And this is the first time in we're starting the second year where all 5 of us on the school committee actually have students in the school system. And so we've covered the gamut of elementary, middle, and high school. So we have an idea of what's going on through our own students and through relationships we have with all of you and your teachers. And so I'm currently the chair this year.
I'm the vice chair, Holly Vitsky-Lynch.
And my name's Anna McDevitt, and I've been on the school committee for 6 years now.
So Mr. McDevitt was just recently reelected, and he's starting his 3rd 3-year term. And we rotate who's the chair, the vice chair, and the clerk every year. So everybody shares those responsibilities. So the 3 main things that we really manage, the overarching things we cover are the superintendent, and we just recently did a search to replace Dr. Price, who will be leaving in a few short weeks. The second thing we do is we approve the budget, which is the whole directive of what the budget is focusing on comes from our strategic plan and our goals that we work on in collaboration with the superintendent and the leadership team of the school department. And the third thing is we work on setting policies and updating and changing policies that are kind of like the student handbook of education for the district. Involves activities for you, but also how we run facilities, how we make decisions, and certain things around there. And Mr. McDevitt has a good example he'd like to share with you about that.
Sure. So when we talk about policies, you know, it's a little bit of rules of what happens within the schools, but it's also kind of other things that impact you on an everyday basis that you probably don't even realize. So one policy, for example, is when do we start school? Do we go back before Labor Day? Do we go back after Labor Day? Do we have February and an April vacation? Do we just have a March vacation? How does that work? So those are all decisions that the school committee makes in part of developing the policies and the procedures for that. One change that we're looking at right now, we'll be voting on at our next meeting, which is June 21st, has to do with what do we do with snow days, right? So we're going to go back after Labor Day. So we know that we have to do 180 days. Well, this year we had 9 snow days. So when do we get out of school? Does anyone know? You're not counting, right? 27th. June 27th, right? So we now started to interfere a little bit with summer camps. Somebody may have vacations. You just want to be out of school because it's hot and it's sticky and it's gross and all of those fun things. So we looked at it and said, from a policy perspective, what can we do to try to shorten that? We still have to go 180 days, but what's the way that we can do that to help reduce that? So we had conversations with Dr. Price, and her leadership team then kind of came back with some work with that. And so what we're looking at is really kind of, we don't know what we're going to call it yet, but raise days is a little bit of the term that's thrown out right now. So we're going to look at next year setting an end date for the end of school, June 21st, for example. So we're going to say we're not going to go to school past June 21st. That's a policy. Now, that includes 4 snow days. Now, what happens if we have 5 snow days? We might get an assignment that goes out to everybody. So you might have to spend a little bit of time doing some English or ELA or science or social studies on that time that you're out of school. Whether it's because trees went down like we had in October and we lost 90% of the town lost power, or we had 25 inches of snow and we just couldn't get to school. It's not that that assignment is necessarily due the day it comes back immediately. It could be that it's due a week later or 2 weeks later when you have electricity, internet, all of those fun things back. But that now means that day can count, right? So instead of now having to go to school 180 days, you might end up going 179 if we get the assignments and things like that turned in. So it's a policy change that you might think, oh, it doesn't really impact us, but it does, because now you're starting to get out those days earlier. So does that give you a little bit of an example? What do we think? Thumbs up, thumbs down, like it, don't like it? Thumbs up, I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up. Thumb down, wow. What's up with that? You don't like that?
I'd rather go to school.
You'd rather go to school?
There's always a contrarian in the crowd.
Okay.
So this is your opportunity now to ask us questions. And I'm going to ask you to be really good about asking questions today because we have two very special guests, folks. We have two very special guests in our room today. Juliette, your teacher, Juliette Darmon's parents from France are here today. Let's welcome them to Civics Day. I'm going to also tell you, as you're thinking of questions, is that we have made a bet amongst ourselves as to whether a specific question that we hear at almost every one of these sessions comes up, and we'll let you know if that happens. So who has the first question for us today? Come on. We're not going to be shy. Stand up and ask away.
How do you determine whether we have a snow day or not?
Well, there's one person who answers that question.
It's her favorite part of the job.
It's my favorite part of the job.
Not.
So there's a number of ways that I determine if there's a snow day. The first is I spend a lot of time on Weather Underground, which I have found is the best service. I spend a lot of time looking at it. I look at radar. I try to kind of learn the best about that. Two, one of the rules is, it's called the donut rule. You check with all of your surrounding communities about whether or not they're going to have a snow day. You don't want to be the middle of the donut where everybody else has decided to have a snow day and you don't have one, because then people are pretty upset. So I talk with other superintendents. The superintendent of Andover and I really only talk at 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't talk to him any other times, but we talk often at 4 o'clock in the morning or the night before. Methuen, all of us, we talk. I will also work very closely with the Department of Public Works, so that's on the municipal side. So every week there's somebody who's on call for the Department of Public Works. We have a nice relationship. Again, it's a 3 o'clock, 4 a.m. Conversation. What do the roads look like? What do we see as the school, as what's going to happen in the future as we get closer to school? A lot of it is about timing. If we get 3 or 4 inches at 5 o'clock at night, we can easily get rid of it. If we get 3 or 4 inches at 7 a.m., it's really difficult. I also talk to the bus company, because one of the things we have to think about is how does the bus company feel about that. If it's an issue of power, I often also talk to the town manager. So this year, a number of the storms, it wasn't really about the snow. It was the one in October, but there were also storms in the middle of the winter, and it was much less about the fact the roads were clear, but we didn't have power within our schools. So I will tell you, and then I spend a lot of time on Twitter, which I know many of you may follow me, just because I want you to know what I'm thinking, right? So like, hey guys, I can't make a decision tonight, I'm going to bed, stop worrying, I'll wake up at 4 a.m. I will tell you, in my household, I'm relegated to a part of the house during snow days because I'm up all hours of the night, and no one in my house, especially my kids, want me anywhere near them. They consider me most grumpy during snow day calls because it's really stressful. You don't want to make the wrong call. My colleague in Cambridge this year made what many said was the wrong call, and he was at the front of the Boston Globe. Right? I mean, that's not what you want. We work really hard to try to make the right call, and I will tell you there's a lot of data that I take in, and ultimately I have to make a decision. If putting you guys out on the roads, on buses, on cars is going to make it unsafe for you, or putting you in a building that doesn't have electricity, I have to prioritize your safety. I will tell you this idea of the raise days, it's very stressful. So this year with 9 snow days, there was one day that I called that took it from the last day being Friday to the next day being Monday, and I struggled with that decision. That was going from the 6th to the 7th day, and I was trying everything not to put us into the following week, but ultimately there was a ton of snow on the ground and there was nothing I could do. So everyone who knows me knows that like I take it very seriously. And ultimately, no matter what decision you make, like, you're gonna not make everybody happy. I just try to communicate as much as possible so people know where it is. I think people don't want to be surprised by the decision. I think people appreciate when I say, hey, not gonna make the call till the morning, at least they know, or I'll make it by 9 o'clock tonight. Because for parents, especially of younger kids, if I don't have school, they have to figure out ways to make sure that their kids are taken care of. Does that answer? Yeah.
So you've just had an inside look at For those of us who are older, I remember when Weather Underground meant something very, very different.
Yeah,
than
that's right,
that.
exactly.
You'll have to check out with your social studies and history teachers. Question over here. You're next.
If you're like,
Stand up.
so my friend has this. They call them blizzard bags in Clarkstown, New Hampshire. The rule with the snow days, you have a certain amount of work. They call them blizzard bags. If this does get elected, when will it be applied?
Policy judgment by the school committee.
Yeah, most likely starting September next year.
There's a smile.
We feel like that too, by the way.
Thank you. Question?
So when you announce that it won't be a snow day, do you enjoy seeing our reactions of despair?
So,
Was that rhetorical?
So, one of the things is, as you guys know, maybe if you follow me, I have become a superintendent who is on Twitter. There have been some times where kids, I love some of the memes, they make me laugh. Especially the ones when they're trying to convince me to make a decision, those are quite funny. I will tell you there have been times when people have been inappropriate with me on Twitter. And you know what I've done is it's actually been quite a wonderful experience, because I think in this technological space that many of you exist in, you think you can put something out into kind of technology and not have any consequences for that. And so I see that as a wonderful opportunity for me to educate. So somebody will say something inappropriate to me, and then what I've done is I can often figure out who the student is, because I have access to lots of information. And so what I've done is come up to a student and say, "Hi, I'm Dr. Price. Is there anything you'd like to say to my face?" And that has created a wonderful discourse about the power that you have, and understanding that although you think you're hiding behind your phone or your computer screen, you're actually talking to a living, breathing human being who has feelings. And we have a conversation, and I have found those conversations to be wonderful educational opportunities, because ultimately, I'm not a weatherman, I'm an educator. So it's wonderful to have those conversations.
More questions? Different subject. Please, stand up.
How is the building of the new education building going to benefit the middle school and the high school?
Great question.
So let's start with the policy side of that first, and we'll let the school committee answer that question.
Thanks, Mr. DeSalvo.
You're very welcome.
Awesome.
Would you like a weather question?
Can we talk
My
about
job
snow?
is to afflict the comfortable, so go right ahead.
That's right. So that's a very good question, and I think Dr. Price really started off by saying, we have class size guidelines that the school committee has developed that we try to operate within, and the place that we could make the greatest impact most quickly was in the elementary schools. So by building the Ann Bradstreet Early Childhood Center, we impacted 5 schools, which you guys don't get the benefit of it, but maybe your younger siblings do. We've taken care of a huge number of students across the district with this adjustment. And so that's a place to start. There are class size issues here at the middle school as well. I think we've talked about that. And I think the town manager, the superintendent, everyone has been very clear about the fact that we're going to need to make some adjustments here to be able to make space to make your class sizes, your team sizes is really what it is, your team size is smaller by adding more teams. Just like in the elementary schools, we couldn't add more teachers because we had nowhere to put them. They couldn't have classes in the hallway. So we needed classrooms, so that's part 1. Part 2, then you backfill and add more teachers. Same thing has to happen here. At the high school, that's a fairly new building, and we have a lot of space to be able to expand and add classes, and it's often class offerings that change more than class sizes. We offer more sections of something, for instance. But we needed to start somewhere. The place that we could have the greatest impact in the shortest amount of time was starting with building the new kindergarten space attached to the Early Childhood Center, and we're going to continue on from there. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'll add to that a little bit. So, one of the other things with the middle school is we know that there's a space issue. And not April of 18, April of 17, we actually submitted to the Massachusetts School Building Association a proposal to make a revision or an addition to the existing structure here. That was denied. No consequences, no penalty for that. We have reapplied for that. So we redid that in April of this year. So what does that mean? It means we'll now wait a little bit of time. I think we find out sometime in like the September, October time frame whether or not it's approved for us to go forward. If that happens, what that means is we get reimbursed from the state. So if we spend $1, we might get 40 cents back on the dollar. So it impacts what we spend here, the $100 million that Mr. Mailer spoke about earlier. And we would start to look at how do we go about putting that addition on. It's not a one-year solution. We're able to build the Ann Bradstreet Early Childhood Center in about 2 years of planning all the way to opening and funding. With an addition to the middle school, that's probably a 6 to 8 year project. So does it impact you right now? Nope. You'll probably be out of college or the military by the time that actually happens. However, if we don't plan for it today, in 4 years, the problem's going to be even worse, because then we'll have a bigger challenge to overcome. So we're always looking at what those sizes are. We look all the time at class sizes that occur at the lower grades and where they're trending as well. So we've been pretty stable with our student population, but we are making steps to do that as well.
Follow-on questions. Come on.
Come on,
I'll start calling on people. Go right ahead.
About
Stand up.
So why isn't there a judicial system in North Andover?
Ooh, that's the very first time that question has ever come up in the 20 sessions that we've had. There isn't a judicial form because under both the Massachusetts Constitution and the United States Constitution, the judicial branch of government is specific to those forms. Now, some communities, however, do have municipal courts, but the municipal courts are traffic fines, things like that. So we have a really tiny piece of judicial government in North Andover if you get a parking ticket, for instance.
Especially at the high school.
Yes, especially at the high school. But it's not formed. We don't have judges in our communities, as an example. So those are very specific to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and to the United States government. You don't want to have disaggregated forms of judicial judgments. Question over here.
Is there someone raising their hand?
Okay, who has another question?
Looks good.
Guys, this is a huge opportunity.
Who has another question for us? Nobody has another question. Well, maybe it's time for us to ask you a question. Are you ready for some questions from us? Or would you rather ask us questions? I thought so. Go ahead.
How do you decide what food is in the cafeteria?
So, how does one decide what food is in the cafeteria?
You did a great job with this.
I'm happy to start. So I want to talk about two things about the cafeteria. So one of the things in North Andover is actually in our school system, the cafeteria actually doesn't cost us anything. So what does that mean by that? We actually have, it's called the enterprise fund. The cafeteria and the expense of the cafeteria, you guys paying for lunch, actually we break even, right? So that doesn't mean that we hire less teachers. It doesn't impact. And the school budget, even in terms of health benefits, which is actually rare, that we don't have to actually, we don't lose money in the cafeteria. Lots of systems lose money. And I'll tell you, in many school systems, they've actually privatized cafeteria food, and everyone thought that was going to be great. And I can tell you, as a school system where it was privatized, no, not good. Right? So the good thing about the cafeteria here is that it doesn't take away from your educational resources. That being said, there's lots of federal and state laws that impact what we can serve in the cafeteria. Former First Lady Michelle Obama, actually, this was one of her major things that she did around making sure that school lunches met a set of kind of nutrition guidelines. So a bunch of years, for instance, we had to get rid of French fries, right, which was a major moneymaker for cafeterias, but it was considered not to be healthy. So there's a lot of rules and regulations about how much we can give you, actually, what the quantity, what is the calorie, the amount that is associated with that meal. And then actually, in terms of what is actually decided, there's a woman who's in charge of the enterprise fund of the cafeteria. She works for the North Andover Public Schools, Miss Murphy, and she works very closely with nutritionists and with the folks in the cafeteria to determine what she can serve you within the guidelines. I will also tell you she's wonderful about taking feedback on menus. And thinks very creatively and thoughtfully about within the guidelines, but she can't decide I want to put French fries back into the food because actually federal and state regulations prohibit that. And you might say, well, why do you listen to them? But we have about 20% of our students in North Andover get a free or reduced lunch meal, and if we don't adhere to the guidelines of the state and federal government, we actually don't get any funding from them for the lunches that we're providing free or reduced. So there's a financial limitation for us to not be able to say we're going to do our own thing. Does that make sense?
Questions on the dark side of the room? Come on, speak up.
No one has any questions when we watched. Oh, you please. Go ahead.
On the topic of cafeteria foods, I know some of my friends have been complaining about how sometimes what you pay doesn't really add up to what you get. Is there any way that could be changed, or is there any places where we can complain?
So the quantity issue is one I'm going to allow Ms. Mabley to answer.
I have heard actually from elementary school students that kindergarten, first, second, they get plenty of food, that's great, but then by the 5th grade, they want to have a second lunch. They feel like they want 2 slices of pizza. They feel like it's not enough. And is that what you're hearing from friends here as well? But you're saying a dollar value. They're saying they're not getting value, they're not getting enough to eat.
Yeah, because I know a friend, he was making the point where pizzas are like $3.50, or you can go to like an official pizza restaurant and get a whole entire 2 pizzas or so for like $5.
I'd love to know where that is. But actually, back to what Dr. Price said, is so we couldn't just give you lots more pizza for your $3.50. There are certain regulations that we have to provide for you for a nutritious meal. And so all that goes into how Ms. Murphy and the team puts together your lunch offerings. The other part of the question was, how would you give complaints about that? I'm sure you could write a letter to the food service department and express
More questions?
with concrete information.
More questions? My turn to ask you a question. How many are you concerned about safety in school? What concerns you about safety in school?
Safety issues, what are their concerns?
Go ahead.
The guns.
Guns, how?
And in other states, they have people shoot school shootings, so it's kind of scary. Some people about the guns.
So let's comfort you about that. That I know, as a matter of fact, this entire community wants to assure you that safety is the #1 thing that we do so that you can afford to be educated. Because we don't want to go to funerals and we don't like tears. And I think Dr. Price might be the best person to give you immediate comfort.
Yeah, I think that as a school system, there are a number of different areas around gun safety and these years we've gone through. So the first is, I'll give you one example. As many of you know, many of you walked out. I was in the cafeteria with you, and we had 19 minutes of silence, if you all remember that day this year. I made a decision as superintendent of schools in consultation with the school committee that any student who chose to do that would not suffer any disciplinary consequences. Some superintendents made a different decision, but I felt very strongly that you had the right to express that this wasn't okay, and that you should not have any disciplinary consequences for that. So I felt very strongly about that, and I hope you know that we support the fact that you should have a safe place to go to school every day. I told an earlier group, you know, one of the things I do as superintendent is I have to very measured kind of say, like, you're not going to have disciplinary consequences, but the person inside of me wanted to get on that table and start screaming, right? But as superintendent, I had to be professional and be so a letter went out to the community that was very much, we respect everyone's opinion on this, but there's not going to be any disciplinary consequences. I will tell you, some parents were upset with me. They thought you should have disciplinary consequences, and I said, yes, you can be upset, but I'm not changing my mind. So that's the first thing. Second is, we think a lot about how to keep you safe, and so we work with the police and the fire department on the municipal side. For instance, give you a very concrete example. 2 years ago, we decided to move to Alice, which is through pre-K to 12, which was an aggressive move by a community. There are not a lot that move to the Alice, which we know from safety experts across the country is believed to be the safest way that we can respond to a really difficult situation. You all have been trained on that. You know what to do. That's one example. We put in safety procedures. So for instance, the vestibules in schools, a lot of decisions we made about the Ann Bradstreet Early Childhood Center, about where the door was, and sight lines had to do with safety. So we worked really hard on that. And the other thing I'll tell you is all of us, in either our professional capacity or also our personal capacity, are advocating with the state and federal government around gun laws. And I will tell you that schools feel very strongly. We are fortunate to live in Massachusetts that has some of the strongest gun laws in the country. There was a really interesting article in the Boston Globe that if every state in the country had Massachusetts gun laws, how many fewer gun deaths there would be in our country. Massachusetts has really gotten aggressive about that. However, there's many of us advocating to say that we need to think very strategically about the gun laws. I will tell you, it pains me at my core that when we walk into schools, we have to be talking about this. It pains me at my core. I want to talk about pushing you, making you think, thinking creatively, pushing yourself to think collaboratively, learning, educating, and the fact that we have to worry about whether or not you are safe when you come in our doors and you'll be safe till you leave our doors pains me. But I will tell you, we are taking it very seriously. It's not okay. Let's just start there, and we're going to work really hard to keep you as safe as possible. And some of this needs to be advocacy at the state and federal level, in my opinion.
And that's why Civics Days is so important. I went to school in this building. I went to high school in this building, as did my sister, Kim Sapienza, who's one of your teachers here. And we never were concerned about the safety issue. Never concerned about that safety issue. Very different days today. And this community wants to assure you that that's paramount, absolutely paramount. Other questions? Please.
So earlier you were talking about like how much money you guys spent, and if we had like the marijuana plant, would that raise the money, or like that you'd spend, or?
All right, that's really an excellent question. Let me take the first stab at that. So we had this question as to whether we should allow cannabis cultivation and a joint research and cultivation industry here in our community. And it came before town meeting. And it was required that town meeting had to judge whether a zoning change could take place. And it needed 2/3 of the vote in order to change the zoning, the use of that property. We all know what property we're talking about. 1600 Osgood Laser Craze, okay? Town meeting turned it down. Now we had an open town meeting. We had, last January 30th, the 4th largest town meeting in the Commonwealth's history here in North Andover. Remember I told you anybody can come to town meeting. Well, almost 3,000 people came to that town meeting. And whether you agree or disagree with the judgment was no. And yes, it cost our community essentially $5 million a year for 20 years, $100 million. That $100 million would have made a significant impact in our town's budget. But it didn't happen. And that's one of the judgments. That's one of the consequences, depending on your opinion, of true public participation. Any other questions, or does anybody else wish to comment on that question?
Chris, do you have a question, sir?
Yes, actually. Not to like fault any of the decision on the walkout, but I saw I believe there should have been consequences for those who participated, because I saw a lot of people who didn't really take the cause seriously, like snickering amongst themselves, and like it was apparent that they didn't really care about the cause of preventing gun violence in schools, and they saw the walkout as an excuse to leave class and talk to their friends. And I feel strongly that we need less more strict gun laws, and that hurt me because I saw people like putting on makeup and stuff, and I want people who were there to care about the cause. And I had a friend who I was like talking to after who also had the same issue with the walkout. But on a lighter topic, I think I know the question that you want us to answer. You want us to talk about the pirate guy? Is that the question?
Oh, the secret question, no.
No, that's quite all right.
They were talking about, we watched the town meeting clips and there was one engaging moment. It became a hit. Since you were there live,
I would like to know the answer to that question.
But I'm going to answer his question, and I'm going to go back a long, long time.
Oh, boy.
In 1969, I was in this building as a high school freshman, and I led a walkout of 600 students when we only had 800 students in the entire school as a freshman. And I got pretty severely punished for that. I was thrown out of school. I got a 10, and upon appeal, I got a 10-day suspension. I was happy to take that suspension. And there were some kids who took the lock. It was an excuse to walk out of school on a sunny May day. But the most important part of it was for those people who took it seriously, who recognized that there was something important that was being discussed, that it was an opportunity for you, as you've just stood up, to tell those people they ought to be ashamed of themselves for not respecting and understanding how important a consequence and issue it was. So bravo to those of you who stood up and took it seriously. Because you will find in life, in public participation as a matter of civic pride, that there are extraordinarily few people who make judgments of consequence and make consequential judgments of conscience. And you're learning that today, that it's an important and vital thing to do. Participation absolutely rules. Any other questions? I think we have, what, 5-6 minutes left?
we have about 4 or 5 more minutes.
4 or 5 more
yes.
minutes? Any other? Go ahead, questions here? We'll get to you next. Thank you.
Do you think we need to increase the security in our schools?
Judy?
Yeah, you know, it's a great question. You know, the challenge here is when is enough, right? So we keep thinking about this. We don't want schools to resemble prisons, right? So people talk about metal detectors and all of these things, right? And the other challenge is many of the schools, unfortunately, where there have been horrible events, have school resources officers in them, have all of these things. So one of the things that we think about is, you know, at what point does it stop being a school, and what does increased security look like, and how does that feel, and is it going to actually prevent somebody who wants to do something horrific? I think we have talked a lot about what is the appropriate amount of security. What I will tell you that we've been talking about also, and we've been working really hard on, is what amount of additional social and emotional support can we give our kids? Because a lot of these instances have happened from kids who have felt disenfranchised or not supported within the school. So for me, if I'm thinking about the dollars spent, I'm thinking about making sure we're as safe as we can be within reason, but I'd rather spend some of those dollars on making sure the kids feel connected and supported and are given the social, emotional support they need to be successful. And those dollars spent, I think, are potentially better spent. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Question right here.
This could be the last question, Lindsay. It's all you.
I actually led the walkout in this middle
Bravo.
school.
Good job.
I emailed Dr. Price and Ms. McQuaid about like the walkout and everything. And I just wanted to say that every single time the ding from the announcements goes on, I always think to myself, oh my God, this is it. This is over.
And isn't that unfortunate?
It's horrifying. And I always like text my friends like, weren't you horrified? Weren't you scared? And they always respond with, yeah, I thought this was gonna be like the next like tragedy. So I just wanted to say.
That's a very sobering thing to hear, and I'm so sorry for that.
Okay, so everyone,
You're
finish.
going to allow me.
please.
So thank you for a really thoughtful discussion. I really appreciate it. And I want to give real kudos to Mr. McGravy and the whole staff here for pulling this together. It's an extraordinary feat that he works on all year long. And you want to know that you are only the second group in over 20 sessions of Civics Day like this that we've had that didn't ask the question that I thought that you would all ask. I'm going to tell you what that question is, and you're not going to get an answer. You'll have to come to town meeting maybe and influence that. And the question is, how come there's no air conditioning? And you don't get to hear the answer now. Thank you all for coming.
Stop. Should you give a round of applause?